Welcome back to Ashan. Gufroth here. This is a very special episode. There's no math or theory crafting involved here. I'm going to tell you a story about the most inspiring event that I've experienced in my 20 months of playing this game. Since I don't want to plaster you with a wall of text, I figured this time I should do proper and actually record audio. As some of you know, I live in a very noisy house, so all the recording had to be done outside in very sparse circumstances. I apologize for the background noise. Our story takes place in June 2020, the second anniversary month. The event in question is not an anniversary dungeon. It is not a summoning festival. It is not the Arena Golden Month. In fact, this event was not even created by the devs at all. It was actually created by the guilds. Our story begins as follows. In the 14 months prior, the Gold Dragons, formerly known as Monsters Incorporated, have been doing advanced raids. In recent months, the core members, longtime members who were Nightmare capable, have been pushing to do Nightmare raids. Unfortunately, the core members comprised half or fewer of the entire guild. Based on the data, I maintained that the odds of winning were against us and decided to keep the status quo. In the month of March, one of my officers, without consulting anyone ahead of time, decided to challenge my authority outright and launch the Nightmare raid anyway. It was a sheer disaster. And in the aftermath, one of our best raiders, having given up on us, left for another guild. Realizing that my situation was unsustainable, I eventually relented and decided that we would gradually push towards the Nightmare raids. One of the first steps we did to make sure this could work is that we decided to join the Dragon Alliance, which consisted at that time of two guilds that were high performing and constantly gave us encouragement and tips on how to do a Nightmare raid. About a month into our membership in the Alliance, we decided to make a second attempt on the Nightmare raid. We did it on June 7th, Saturday, which unfortunately also ended in failure. But third time's a charm, so on Sunday, June 8th, we did it and finally succeeded. However, this victory required that all the core members were present, not a single one could be missing. In fact, we had to have all of our wingmates, with the exception of 2 present, in order to manage the approximate 30 million damage required. Because of this, I realized that we couldn't do Nightmare raids on any day we wanted, so I set up a poll to determine when the vast majority of the guild could show up to ensure victory, and we decided that Wednesdays would be best, and the next scheduled Nightmare raid would take place on June 17th. The Friday before the scheduled Nightmare raid, one of our core members of Wave 4 decided to suddenly leave to join a newly formed guild. This made us short about 3 million damage, but we figured, what's the big deal? Faceless Library is coming up, so we can probably make up a couple of new teams to make up for the loss. Little did I realize that was a harbinger for a much bigger problem. About 24 hours before the scheduled Nightmare raid, 2 other members decided to suddenly leave for that same newly formed guild, one of whom was the officer who had challenged my authority back in March. Now we were in a real crisis. We were a few million short of being able to kill off the Dragon Eel. And 24 hours wasn't enough time to go out to the main and recruit brand new members, and it wasn't enough time to create brand new teams to make up for our lost damages. Although I've been a leader long enough to know that players come and go, I was livid at the timing of his departure, so I went and asked my officer privately, what in the world are we supposed to do with a Nightmare raid now that he left all of a sudden, and we had about only 24 hours left to do something about it? I'll spare you the details, but his answer was less than helpful. And so I weighed out my options. First, we could just go and push for the Nightmare raid anyway, with 27 remaining members. But I knew that if we failed this time, it wouldn't just be one major player who would leave. It would effectively end my tenure as the leader, and probably break up the guild. The second option wasn't much better, which was to postpone the Nightmare raid date. This was problematic because not only did the entire guild look forward to being able to do another Nightmare raid, but I also wouldn't be able to know when the next time would be. In the end, I opted for door number 3. I went to the Dragon Alliance leaders, and I asked if we could borrow a couple of their raiders to help us out. This idea had 2 major problems. The first was a practical problem. First of all, when you switch from one guild to another, you have a 1-hour cooldown to join. Secondly, even after you join, you have a 24-hour cooldown before you can join a raid. That's a 25-hour minimal lead time. To make matters worse, the 2 players who had left us were our core Wave 1 players, which meant that the damage had to be done as early as possible. The second problem was an incentives problem. The Sapphire and Azure Dragons already did 1 or more Nightmare raids each day, and whoever joined us was going to miss out on 2 days worth of Nightmare raids. So this wasn't just a plea for urgency, it was a plea for altruism. But before even 1 hour had ended, we already got 3 people volunteering. We decided that 2 of them would be enough to finish the job, so we took 2 of them and brought them on board as quickly as possible. The 2 players we got were no ordinary players. One of them was actually one of the top raiders of the Sapphire Dragons, and both members were exemplary team players when it came to providing contributions and the like. I was so amazed at their quick kindness, and I really didn't know what I could ever offer in return. So I decided I would try to help as much as I could, and I decided I would make a special little deal. We had a lot of battle commands left, enough to do 7 more nightmare raids in a row. So I told them since they were here, why don't we just do a whole bunch of nightmare raids back to back to make up for the fact that they'd lose 2 days. So over the next 3 days, from Wednesday, June 17th, all the way to Friday, we had done 6 nightmare raids in a row. The Gold Dragons had effectively won 3 weeks worth of loot in advance, and we decided that we could use that loot to create brand new armies quickly to make up for our lost members. But something else happened, something even more important than the loot. By our 3rd or 4th nightmare raid, the top raider of Sapphire Dragons had an idea. Why don't you guys actually just finish the entire raid without us? We'll just tap for a few points so we can go get some participation loot, but you guys do this on your own. I was a bit stunned at the idea because not only were we low on numbers, but in prior raids we had to do coordinated attacks in order to make the quota. When we were doing the back-to-back nightmare raids, we weren't sticking to a strict schedule, so I wasn't sure if we were going to manage things. Most of our players did very well in Wave 3, not so well at the other ones. But whether we were inspired by the performance of our special guests, or whether we simply didn't want to be outdone by them, many of our core members had done an exemplary job and had actually managed to finish with the numbers that we had. In the end, I had to admit that our longtime coach / special guest had far better faith in our guild than I did. And you can bet that that faith came at the perfect time, because as many of you know, June and July weren't exactly very good times to recruit new members. We had actually spent the following month completing the nightmare raids with only 25 members, but because of the faith that the Dragon Alliance members had shown us, we were able to beat the nightmare raids every single time. I know that many of you are upset about the lack of events or content in this game, but I hope that the story shows you that the best events are really the ones that we create on our own. I can't name a single event the devs could ever create that would match the kind of good and humanity that we've experienced with the Dragon Alliance. And there certainly isn't any kind of loot or reward that could compare. So in the end, I'll leave you with this. First, in the end, it's really up to us to create our own fun and our own meaning. And secondly, dragons really do fly together.